I'm really big on executive functioning. Like, I want our kids to have an idea. I want them to make a plan for their idea, and I want them to execute that idea, and then I want them to troubleshoot and figure out where it went wrong and how they can fix it. And that starts in play. And when we take away play with little kids, you are losing so much critical thinking. So it's a very dynamic learning, but I'm like, education needs to be about growing the brain.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Dr. Alex Show. And as you can see, we have a new background and we have a lovely guest today. So I hope you enjoy this and all of the new labels and things that are getting popped up on the YouTubes and the interwebs. Our social media marketer, Faith Fritchley, if you're out there listening, she absolutely loves it. She's like more excited about that than I think the content at times, and that's fine. So anyway, what I want to talk about today was a new aspect that got brought into my life, and it's a blessing to be part of the Marian Hope Academy in the Kansas City area. And sitting across from me is the CEO of Marian Hope, and I was asked to be part of the board of directors. And I'm going to pass it off to Angie here in a sec, but what Marian Hope is from my perspective is just another resource to help families. And she's going to explain the ins and outs, and it's quite a story. But with that, Miss Angie Knight, who are you? What is Marian Hope? And let people know how it got started, because that's a really good story.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you, and we're excited for you to join our board. Okay, so I'm going to kind of give a little bit of a chronological background. I am actually a speech pathologist. I have worked with children for over 24 years in the Kansas City community. So have a huge passion for kids, and I do see myself as an advocate for this generation of kids. That's my heart, is just to I guess my vision is that every child knows that they are a creation of a loving God and was designed with a plan and a purpose, and they have gifts and geniuses beyond what can even be imagined. And I really love speaking life into kids and working with a lot of kids that might not fit the box that our education system has created. I just felt really called back in 2013 to start a micro school. I just wanted to pioneer a different kind of education that worked for all kids. Prior to that, I guess I'm not really going chronologically here, but prior to that, we started a developmental learning center where we provide speech pathology and occupational therapy to children with special needs in our community. The problem was I didn't see this bridge between therapy and education. It almost was like education was running this way and the therapy supports were running this way. And I just felt like there needed to be more of a bridge. So I had done a lot of IEP trainings. I'd gone into a lot of schools, coaching teachers and things like that, on helping them understand kind of like why the kids are doing what they're doing and ways to better educate them. And then finally that started like early 2000s. And then finally in 2013 is where I was like, I just feel like we need to do a different kind of model of education. That is a Christian school. I had a huge heart for Christian education. So we started in 2013 with a micro school model. It is for all kids. I think that's one of the myths. We are kind of branded for children with special needs, but my heart is that every child is seen for who they are. Like, I like to focus on what they're capable of and not what they're not capable of. And one of the greatest things to help progress is blending kids that might learn differently or think differently with kids that are considered more neurotypical.
And I'm going to interrupt you there, because that's huge. Absolutely huge. Because first of all, to your point about being branded, when we have patients come in and they're figuring out schooling for their kiddos, Marian Hope will come up even before being a board member. Yeah. And regardless of even how mild to wild their issue is. It usually comes up. And for the ones that are like, oh no, my kid can learn, we can just handle school, we got to work on other stuff. Okay, great. I'm like, no, here's the thing. You can still get so much more out of it if you want to go the private route. So yes. And then when it comes to kiddos with needs, they always do better when they're around, quote, neurotypical kids.
Yep.
And then to the parents' responsibility of, quote, neurotypical kids, they need to understand what their role is around these other children.
Yes.
Obviously, you're not there to pick up bad habits. You're there to be a leader.
Yes.
And unfortunately, if that means you're only a 7-year-old there to have some fun, well, guess what? You got someone to look over and take care of.
Yeah, there's a stigma still. I think everyone wants to include, but it's more than just, oh, I'm a nice kid, I'm going to sit with a student that might look and think differently than me at lunch. Like it's beyond that. It's creating a community. It's creating a sense of belonging. Like we are in this together. So for example, my daughter went to a very great elite private Christian school. But when I felt called to start Marian Hope Academy, of course, she came along with me. And she was one of probably 5 kids that were considered neurotypical. But I didn't care because I knew that what she would gain from befriending and being around and being a leader to, her friends with dyslexia, her friends with high functioning autism, her friends that have gifts that she didn't have, but yet their gifting wasn't in academia. It was in something different. But she learned things and she learned skills that she wouldn't have gotten in a regular academia setting because our school doesn't focus on just the logical and the linguistics. And I think we've created these education models that are so focused on logical and linguistics, 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, that we're missing out on all these other geniuses. So I don't even like to look at kids like with disabilities. I'm like, okay, where's your genius? And how can we really nurture that and bring that up? Because just because they're not good at something, they are capable of many things. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, you don't have the behaviors. You teach them that emotional quotient. I mean, you can teach skills to kids. Kids are so capable. But the problem is, I always look at Jesus. I was like, he chose 12 disciples. He could have chose 25. He could have had 25 disciples out there, but he didn't. He chose 12 because there's power in numbers, and sometimes less is more. And if I'm a teacher and I want to really reach a human being, it's hard to do when I have 25 kids in my class.
Yeah.
So we created a micro school model, and there's no more. We will not put more than 8 to 10 kids in one class, and it is unbelievable.
So then for the parents listening, is that 8 to 12 kids in an age group or a grade level?
We do a little mixed aging. So like in our elementary, every kid is assessed. So they are assessed for where their reading level is at, where their math level is at. And we put them in a class. So yeah, you might have 2 or 3 different ages in a class, but we don't want kids to think about that or worry about that. That is just where they're at. So for me, a good education is where's the child at and where's their next step without the stigma of, oh, they're behind and, oh, they're not going to meet standards. I'm like, they're not going to meet standards anyway because this is just a checklist for parents and just trying or for teachers to just go through a checklist. And there's no more, like when we created the standard-based learning, there's no more organic learning. Just because I teach this doesn't mean the student is getting that.
Yep.
And I also feel like we need purposeful education. Like, yes, teach them the skill of reading. That is a life skill of writing. Number sense, good, strong number sense math, because we are a numerical world. That's how God made it. But there's some things that are in the standards where it's like, what is this? Why are kids spending time on this throughout the day? And if you think about it, what kids practice is what they get good at. So if we want them to be strong leaders, we need to teach them leadership skills and give them opportunities to lead. Mm-hmm. If we want them to serve, we need to teach them how to be a great disciple and service, and then give them opportunities to serve. So what they practice is what they will get great at. I do think one thing about Marian Hope Academy is it is a community. And what I love is you do see very, strong athletes, neurotypical kids just being friends and not even seen, like they don't even look at it as disabilities. These are just my friends, they don't. And that's the kind of community we need to create.
And okay, so I could go down that road, but what I like that I just heard is standards. So it's not to bash. I'm not here to bash anything per se, but when we look at federal standards, the abilities of our children nationwide, on average, have only gone down. Now, we live in this beautiful, we do. You're nearby, I assume. Yep. We live in Lee Summit, where assuming the abilities of most of the school district is going up per se. So when you're in when you're in an area where it's doing a little bit better than others, you're like, well, that's just not true. These kids are great. My kid's doing better, and the kids down the road are doing better. Well, yeah, sure. But according to the federal government, it's actually going down. And with the standards being set by federal government, state statutes, and anything that goes with that, the kicker is it puts pressure on the kids and the parents. And if there's one thing that I know I hear a lot of is, quote, testing anxiety. And we, in my mind, I'm not a psychologist, obviously, but in my mind, that does not go along well with the mantra of inclusion that you see a lot of in society today. Inclusion of everyone, regardless of what their lifestyle is like and who they are and who their disabilities are, all of that. But this trying to meet standards, and you have kiddos that are maybe not there, they're there, or they're way there, and then eventually everyone knows their scores. There's an odd almost divide still. Mm-hmm. And I think that does not go along with this whole inclusion right. I don't know, right, movement because, that's going on.
If a teacher has here, it's just, I could go off on standards for a long time, because what are the standards? What do you, I mean, I think the goal of any good education system is to know the goal. What is your goal? And the goal has now become to meet a list of standards. The goal has become to get high test scores. So our education system is now fostered around that goal. But the goal should be to teach children to read, to teach them to write, to teach them to think. Like, a standardized test score doesn't tell me, are they a strong leader? Are they compassionate? Do they have a strong EQ? Can they self-regulate themselves? Because if you look at studies, they show that the top percentage of successful people have high EQs. The lowest, the ones that are losing their jobs constantly and stuff, usually have really high IQs. Yeah. And so there's so many things on the standards that don't make a bridge from education to real life.
Sure.
And that is the biggest. So yeah, not only are my kiddos that have dyslexia and other learning disabilities going to fall way short and not give those teachers and government the test scores they want, they're also not getting to utilize the skills that they actually do have to be nurtured and grown to have a purpose in the community someday when they are an adult. And that's where education has to shift. It has to be about the kid. What we've done is we've created a box. This is our box. This is what we're going to teach. Every kid comes and fits in it. And it should be, these are my kids, and this is what I'm going to do to help them be better. And you have to know your kids. I mean, you look at Finland. Finland has one of the best education systems in the world, and they teach the kids. They give a lot of autonomy to the teachers and say, you are the teacher, you know them better than the government, you teach your kids. And we're losing teachers in droves because we're not letting them do what God's called them to do, and that is actually to teach. They're just following the list of standards, checking it off. Did it. Now I hope they pass the test.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And I know that's the reason why some of the teachers I know have actually just simply gone from public to private school, where they just have some more leniency.
Yeah.
Where they can do a little bit more and do what they were thinking they were able to do when they went to school for it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the teachers are our heroes. They have our kids 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. They should have the autonomy to teach, but they should also have the support too. And so when you have kids that have, I think oppositional defiant disorder is like 16% of kids. There's 1 to 3 in every classroom. Mm-hmm. So that sometimes you have to realize, what does that child need? Yeah. If they're not classroom ready, they shouldn't be in the classroom.
Sure.
So you have to help them become classroom ready. There's steps, and it all begins with where the child is at. And that's what we like I always say with Marian Hope Academy, I'm like, we are here for the child, not the masses. And we've got to get back to each unique individual child, because any parent can say, I have 3 kids and not one is the same. So why would we have a cookie cutter standard? We should have all different kinds of schools doing all different kinds of things, all different kinds of choices for all different kinds of parents and families, and values that align.
Yeah. And on that note, it's something that, for instance, I bring up to parents of kiddos that are adolescent age, getting ready to get out of high school. Sometimes they don't like me saying it, but I don't know. I guess it is unsolicited, so I guess they have the right to be upset. But I'm like, well, cool, man. You have the rest of your life to work, so you don't have to sit here and figure out what you're going to do, or even meet this deadline of school just because you're 18 and you're supposed to get it done in 12 years. Our kids have the rest of their lives to learn. It doesn't stop.
No. Yes.
Like what's the worst case that's going to happen with a kid that's really not getting through school all that well? They go another year. They hold back and get their GED. I'll put it this way. I'll tell you how many people have asked me to see my diploma graduating chiropractic school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not a one, let alone undergrad, let alone high school.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't know what my point is there, but it's just with our kiddos, it is going to be individual needs. And it's not to sit here and like bash the public school system, because if it's working for your kid, let it rip. But for the parents that are listening, especially in this area or even anywhere else, and they're looking for alternatives, there is going to be a Marian Hope around. There is going to be this micro school.
Well, I think the micro school model it's starting to grow. I mean, you're starting to see more smaller schools popping up. And you see a lot of parents now starting to homeschool their kids, and they're parents that sometimes that they want a homeschool model, but they don't feel quite equipped, especially in high school. I mean, it's a perfect fit, But you also have to, I always tell parents, I was like, you have to ask yourself first before you're looking for a school, what do you value? And then you find a school that aligns with your values. So our kids learn, because I'm all about, I'm like, if our body is a temple for the Holy Spirit, you're going to learn about your temple. Mm-hmm. You're going to learn how to take care of your temple. You're going to understand your microbiome. You're going to understand the soil and what's been happening with the soil and why it's important to learn how to garden when you are an adult. I want, and the kids will say, oh, you say this all the time. And I was like, yep. Because repetition gets into the brain. And then, and we do a lot. One strategy that we do is tell me back what you know. Like even just the podcasting, like we have a little podcast. I need Nick to come and do a little in-service for our kids. But let's do a podcast on what we're learning in history and how that affects our lives and what we can learn, and getting kids thinking. Like, it's just holistic education is lacking. Like, honestly, what job do we take an ABCD test ever? Or read this paragraph, what's the answers? No, let's read it. What do you think about that? Who are the main characters? Are there any that you can relate to? Like we've made learning so boring for kids. It's just mass memorization that we know they're going to forget. Like I know a lot about nutrition. I've been studying it for 24 years, but I still have to look up things when I go and teach it. So we know this. So our goal for education is to create deep thinkers, strong learners, and help them figure out what they love and they are passionate about. Because when you do that, then the reading starts happening, the writing starts happening about that, and the research, and they start developing more of these academic skills within something that they love. And by high school, we really need to start nurturing that. And then, I was telling Nick, I was like, their senior year, they should be doing so many interns. Like, what's out there, and that's developing leadership. It's developing thinking skills. It's helping them make connections instead of just pigeonholing into classrooms with 25 kids that they're just sitting there on their, just face it. Teachers can tell you they're on their Chromebooks. They're playing their little video games. They're taking pictures of the test and passing it on to the next class. Kids tell me how they cheat, and I'm like, wow. So when they're cheating, they're not learning, but they're just trying to get through the system.
Yeah.
And even parents will say, just work smarter, not harder, because they're so worried about the grades and turning in the homework. So all of a sudden the goals now are the grades, getting the homework turned in. It's not anymore about learning. So I don't care if they have disabilities or not. That's not the point. The point is, where's the child at and where do they need to go and how do we get them there? Mm-hmm. And that's where Marian Hope Academy just really wants to be different. And some people, it's not rigorous enough. Well, then what is rigor? You have to ask yourself, what is rigor?
Yeah. Well, then in that case, then it's not maybe for that kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you have to go to your private college preparatory school that.
Well, my daughter went to MHA and I don't think she'll ever see a B in her life because she's just academic. That's just her thing. She's strong academics. So she's in college. But that's it doesn't matter what school she's going to go to. She's going to do well because she's in that linguistic genius framework. So when you recognize that the system works fine for her, but I wanted her to develop. She could just sit there and fill out worksheets to write her notes and take her tests, and she can memorize anything. But I didn't want that for her. She's a chef. She plays 4 instruments. She's led a play. She's a strong leader because I didn't want her high school years just to be about having to make straight A's. And she's also a perfectionist, which my perfectionist, it's so much stress and anxiety, and I didn't want her spending her high school years with the stress and the anxiety, which then leads to depression and all these other things. Her mental health, I was not going to sacrifice academic rigor for her social and emotional well-being.
Yep.
Not necessary.
Yes.
And it's been proven it doesn't lead to higher cognition. More homework does not lead to higher cognition. It doesn't. So, and if they're in school 7 hours a day, they shouldn't have to go home to do more homework at night. Sometimes I just look at some of the schools. I was like, what are they doing during the day?
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
it makes you wonder because I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but there are arguably countries that you could go toe-to-toe in terms of a standardized test, and those countries are going to be in school about 2/3 of the time, maybe half the time.
Yes.
And they're doing just as well, if not better.
Yep.
And I know one reason I know this is because we do take care of a lot of Christians, and oftentimes they'll say, all right, we're out, Dr. Alex. I'm like, where are you going? Well, we're going to go do a mission in Italy. Great. Then I hear that they're really looking forward to it because the kids are going to go to school till about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they're going to hang out and basically party the rest of the day as a family. And the schooling is fantastic. How does that happen?
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun. So.
Well, again, organic learning. We learn out. They say actually most kids learn 80% of everything in the home. It's not in the school. So how and with information at the palm of their hands, they can learn anything that they're interested in.
Sure.
So schools have to shift. We're at a time where we have a different generation. It's a different environment that they're growing up in, and our education system needs to match the culture and the generation that we're serving. So
then, which is awesome, by the way. So then just kind of giving more info about Marian Hope, about how many kids you got, how many teachers are there, staff, faculty, what's it look like? What's the big difference in blending the schooling with the therapy needs?
Yeah, so it's a micro school by design.
Yeah.
So we're not competing to be like this big, huge, if anything, if God calls us to plant the model, we would plant the model. But with this generation, shepherding is a big thing for me. Kids need wise counsel around them, and that shepherding and helping them navigate this crazy world. And so because of that, we have about I mean, it's crazy. We probably have about a 1:5 to a 1:6 student teacher ratio.
Jeez.
Now the classroom sizes can go 8 to 10, but we have paras there. But I mean, like we know our kids that could do really, really well on an ACT. So we're going to take them in a small group and really practice them. Like we really know our kids. We know our kids were like, you know what? We're just going to go test optional. We know our kids that are going to go to trade schools. Like we have one that's super interested in film, and we're getting him interns for with that. So when you really want to know the child and get to know the child and help, you can't be huge. So we do have openings. We always have openings in our kindergarten class. We'll take 6 to 8 in our kindergarten class, and it's amazing. It's amazing. And some of them, if they're ready, I mean, some of them end up being like end of second grade readers by the end. And if they're not, if that part of the brain doesn't click really well, they at least have a strong foundation. So we follow the science of reading. We have a very good conceptual math program. I feel like we have excellent curriculum, but our kids they go outside every day, several times a day. They play in the sun. They're so creative. They're little engineers and little entrepreneurs. And I'm really big on executive functioning. Like I want our kids to have an idea. I want them to make a plan for their idea, and I want them to execute that idea, and then I want them to troubleshoot and figure out where it went wrong and how they can fix it. And that starts in play. And when we take away play with little kids, you are losing so much critical thinking. So it's a very dynamic learning, but I'm like, education needs to be about growing the brain. And then you put in we have a gardening program, so our little ones garden, they cook. We give them opportunities to cook like at least once a month because it can be expensive with food costs. But we want them to be really, I always say, well-rounded. When I say whole child, like our focus is on whole child, I'm talking about the whole child, not just academic. And I think that makes them actually stronger academically in the end.
Yeah.
So, but I say all that back to numbers. We take between, I think the most we would be able to ever reach in our current facility would be about 80 to 85 in a where we could still do the mission. I always say we can't sacrifice the mission for numbers.
Sure.
But we do have openings. And the values definitely have to align. And parents need to know, like, we don't do standardized tests, but guess what? It's a private school. No college none of our kids have not made it into college. They've gotten scholarships. They do take the ACT and the SAT if they need that. But they don't. Why? They don't need that. We know exactly where they're at. We know where they're reading at. We know where they're comprehending at. We know where their math skills are at. We're doing our own individual assessments, so we don't need to do these state assessments.
Sure.
And we know which ones would do well on the state assessments and which ones wouldn't. So why would I have my kids with auditory processing and reading disabilities? Why would I do that to them?
Yeah.
I'm not doing that to them.
Yeah.
For what purpose? Where does that go? They already know they can't. I mean, these sweet kids, they know they're not great at certain things. And why would we're going to take a test and let me stress you out. For what? It's not needed.
Sure. What about I'm drawing the blank on the name, but the pre-K program that you guys have?
Oh, yes, I love it. Okay, so we have our Developmental Learning Center we offer, it's kind of like more probably, I would say 5 to 6 year olds that are not quite ready for kindergarten. So you sometimes get kids that they're just not ready. They need more therapy support, some OT, some fine motor, maybe some speech and language. And it just really, it's directed by speech therapists and an OT who are phenomenal. And there's teacher support in there, but it's just very, very therapeutic and dynamic. And they do pre-reading and all the things that they'll be needing for kindergarten. And some will end ready for first grade in that program. But it's just a half a day, but it works. It's so good. So yes, that takes place at our center at the Marian Hope Center for Children's Therapy. So
that program's awesome because when I first toured it, Teresa spent quite a bit of time discussing that, and she spent a lot of time because I had just questions on it, and it's a big gap filler because some of the most challenging kids that we have that come in office are the ones that have some not necessarily behavioral issues, but they don't have the quite social norms yet to sit there in a kindergarten class. Too much of a disruption, if you will. They might have other disabilities and all of that, but it's definitely a great gap filler because especially in this state, in Missouri, I believe you don't have to go to kindergarten. So you could arguably go to that program and, like you said, get a lot of things buttoned up with your kiddo and get them ready. And then they could continue into kindergarten or first grade at Marian Hope. Or if the parents decide, oh, we're going to go somewhere else, then great. They could still, quote, be on time. Or what's the big deal? Send them into kindergarten. So they're a year behind. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. That's where I want parents to understand, like, we have to respect the child's brain. There are late bloomers, and that is okay. If you and you have your daydreamers, that is okay. Like, it is okay. And I think we've sent as a whole society this like global message, like, this is where your kid needs to be. And I'm like, it's such a lie. Like, let your child go at their pace. Of course, give them what they need. Of course, teach them the skills and things like that. But we have overemphasized disabilities. I mean, this generation, I'm like, I can't even, and I'm in the field of disabilities, like all the different acronyms now. I'm just like, these kids are going to grow up and what do you have after your name? I had ADD, ADHD, OCD, like whatever, it's just like and there's new ones all the time. Well, we do have a very neurodiverse generation. I'm not denying that. We definitely have a lot of stuff going on in our environment that is causing, whether neurological issues, broken brains, however you want to say it. There are things going on. I'm not denying that. But we still owe it to the kids to take them from where they're at and that next step and respect brain development. I've had kids like they blow me away, and they're high functioning adults, but they had learning disabilities and diagnoses when they were younger. Yeah. But they're doing absolutely fine and making a difference in this community. So we can't, I think sometimes that stress of the parents, because they're so nervous and they're so stressed, then that feeds onto the kids. And we need to speak life into these kids. You got this. This is good. And it's okay to boast in your weaknesses. Yep, not that great at reading, but look what I'm really great at art, and I'm a good verbal processor, and I can communicate what I know. Like, look at all these things you can do that some of the kids that might be really good at grades aren't good at. Like, that's the body. I think the body of Christ mentality is so important to me because I know I have weaknesses, and God puts people around me that are strong and where I am weak. And I know I probably have strengths that some people are weak in and that I can take. And that's even at Marian Hope, even our leadership team. It's like we really understand each other. Like, oh, you're really good at that, so you take that, and we create roles based on the gifting that we have of each other, and it's beautiful. And that's what we need to do with our kids and teach them that at young ages, so when they are adults, they have that body of Christ mentality.
Teaching humility.
It teaches humility, absolutely, and God exalts the humble, not the proud. So,
teaching humility yet embracing the gifts.
Yeah. Well, I always say humble confidence. I want you confident, but I want you humbly confident.
Yeah, because you have gifts, but it doesn't mean it's time to blow up the ego. Because where do you think they came from? They're not coming from you.
Absolutely.
And so something I kind of wanted to relate to with parents with kiddos with needs or neurotypical or otherwise. If you look at a really good example is here in Lee Summit, they have a center called Great Beginnings for kids with. These kids do
amazing.
Every single one of those kids do great there. And I haven't been able to see it, but every single one of our patients that are there or going through it, they do amazing.
Mm-hmm. And the early child programs are great.
And what is it that they're doing? They have a lot of staff. They're embracing the kids. They're loving on them. And that's about it.
And they're letting them play. They're letting them explore. They're letting them discover.
Yes.
They're not just sitting them in rows of desks and making them do handwriting before it's developmentally appropriate. So they follow developmental milestones.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side of the coin, the kiddos that have been blessed, they're going into the half-day programs of going to, quote, Summit Tech or whatever that's called now, or other programs where they, we have a young lady who does about half day of school, and then she goes to the fire academy. Yeah. She's going to be a firefighter when she's, I think, not even graduated from school. Yeah. these are the teenagers that I want to hang out with. Mm-hmm. They still have the lust for life. Mm-hmm. They haven't been beaten down by just the things that are out there. They're ready to take on the world. Yet they have a part of this that's in them still of some humility, because every single one of them are like, it's just, they'll actually say to me one way or another, it's kind of cool that I've been able to get this figured out. Yeah. And like kind of do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And my whole point is that the kids that are doing, in my opinion, the best, relatively speaking, are the kids that are given this opportunity of getting out of the traditional classroom setting, if you will.
Yep. And I feel like even our high schools are doing that well. Like once they hit junior, senior year, you know, there's a lot of different VOTEC programs and stuff like that. I do still think like that individual shepherding and shaping is really important because I mean, very few people at 18 know what they want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, some do, but very few, and that's okay. But if you can start triggering some passions and gifts and at least some kind of guidance on some kind of path, they feel so much more successful and empowered. And so I do, but I think what they're doing in the older years needs to start filtering down and even into some of the younger years where kids actually have their kids can do so many great things. Like we had one group of boys, like they did the whole thing. They set up their own golf course in the back of Marian Hope. We don't have a lot of playground equipment or anything, so the kids have to get creative. And they made a 9-hole golf course. Everything is a little different with the humps. They used seeds as balls. They made sticks. They made a shack. Like, it's amazing. All came from their little brains. That is thinking. That should hold just as much value as a standardized test score. But if you start those kinds of projects when they are young and let them think and let them like have an idea and execute, those are going to be the changers for this next generation in this community. So
absolutely.
Schools have a big job to do that. So.
Yeah. And again, it's not a criticism of schools. That I don't want to go down that path. That just it's a bummer.
No, it's not the teachers. It's just we've created a system.
Yeah.
We have a system that everyone is conforming to.
Yeah.
And so if our generation wants to change the system, we need to start changing the system.
100%.
So.
And I think you got to get going in just a bit, but I wanted to, well, I'll see if there's anything else you want to say about Marian Hope, but I wanted to have this question asked because just coming from the standpoint of being in school a long time, quote, going to school to be a doctor, if you will, quote, I felt like I was not taught how to think actually until I got to grad school. I was taught what to think a lot, like all the way through, but the concept of how to think. And I remember debating, I didn't even know it, but I was debating teachers and students going through school because of that.
I love that. Yes.
And actually arguably in chiropractic school, we didn't get taught how to think until we learned, quote, diagnosis, because you have to, it's a process. You have to learn how to think, not what. Anyway, what is, for parents out there that really want to figure out, maybe going this route, checking out Marian Hope, checking out even other micro schools in other parts of the world, what's the big thing that you're doing to get the kids to learn how to think, which I think is more important than what to think? I
love that. Well, I do think that comes in with the environment that you set up, the autonomy you give to kids. I mean, a lot of kids, and it has to be at a developmentally right stage. I mean, our kindergartners definitely need structure and guidance, but it begins in play. It really does. Like, you don't have anything to use. What could you do? What do you want to do? So it's just like allowing them. Another thing is they have to figure out, when you say how to think, I think that is individualized too. So how I learn and how I think might be a little different than someone else. So some kids learn differently and they need to be taught how to think. And so that looks different for each kid. You can try, and as a therapist, that's why I always say, I was like, I need time with a kid before I can teach the parent, because I need to figure them out. And then you give those tools to the kid. So one thing across the board, though, is Socratic questioning, letting kids think deeply, asking them questions. Well, what would happen if, and not having just one right answer. Like there's a lot of different ways to solve problems. There's lots of different ways to critically think. There's lots of different ways to absorb information and content into your brain. And I think that's like, even with AI right now, AI is it's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there.
Yeah.
I mean, it can save time. So that's going to change how we think. I mean, it is going to change, but we have to own it, not let AI own us. So you have to be a good prompter. You have to be creative with how you're prompting it. So those are things we teach the kids, and then we let them practice and help them learn. So I don't think there's just one way. I think the executive functioning training, because everything comes from the frontal part of your brain. That's your chief area of the brain. But if you look at the majority of education in the system we've created, it's all left brain thinking. But then you have your right brain creativity and your innovation, and then you have your frontal lobe executive functioning. I was like, that's where you bring in the how. The left brain stuff is just absorb it in.
Yep.
So
now you're speaking my language.
So, yeah. So anyway, yeah, the brain is phenomenal. And I think that's where when I started, I was looking at different schools and I was like, everything was just academic. And I was like, we have a whole brain here to nurture. How did our education system get solely academic? I mean, our kids read every day, they write every day, they do math every day, but they also get to create, they get to do STEM activities, they get to have ideas, they get to execute, and you have to build those skills. And in the neurodiverse generation, we are seeing a lot of executive functioning difficulties, organizational skills. They need how one child organizes. I can't just say this is how we're going to learn to organize. Okay, let's work together to figure out what is a system that helps you.
Yep.
Because we can't just give them a bad grade to get them organized. Like that is a myth and it's a lie. Like, well, they didn't turn it in, so they're just going to get Fs, and those Fs are going to help them turn it in. Okay, well, now you have the parents all stressed out that are looking at the computer to make sure which grades they need. It's like, this isn't helping the child. Like, you have to give them the tools. Teachers need to help them with those skills. It's like you give them a crutch if they need a crutch, and then you take the crutch away when they don't need the crutch anymore and they have it on their own.
Yeah.
So all of that goes into how to learn.
Love it.
Yeah. Anyway, I could get on a rabbit trail with it. But.
Oh, yeah. Well, you got to go and get pizza for an event for the kids at the school and all that. But what else do you want to say about Marian Hope, and where can they find Marian Hope?
Thank you so much for asking that. They can go to our website. It's www.marianhopeacademy.org, but Marian is spelled with an A, Marian. So some people get that off. And they can find all the information there.
Cool.
So yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah,
so.
I think it was too short. We'll have to have you on again. Maybe even have Teresa in here. It'll get spicy conversation.
Yeah, would love it. And we could just do one whole episode on geniuses. I think it's really good. I love training parents on like all the different geniuses of their kids, so then they can start really like honing in on what they can do and not just what they can't do.
Yes.
So that would be a fun episode to have.
That'd be a really great episode. Yeah. And then I can tie some good neuro into that.
Absolutely. Love it.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. The Dr. Alex Show is brought to you by Shed Light Cold Lasers. Shed Light Cold Lasers is, bar none, the biggest thing that has changed our practice at HML. Not only on a professional basis and the results that we are getting with our patients, because for all the professionals out there, everything from veterinarians to medical doctors to everyone in between, you can use this laser in your practice for just about anything. But on a personal basis, because what's unique about this laser is it is handheld. And if you know anything about cold lasers, a lot of times they're big, they're gaudy, you almost have to bolt them to a wall and you can't take them anywhere. This one you can take anywhere. That's because the diodes are LED, so it runs on really good lithium-ion batteries. And the other awesome feature about this, if you know anything about lasers, is that you can kind of see it on camera there. This laser has red light and infrared light. So we won't go into the details there, but just know that you got all of those features. It also comes preloaded with all of the presets to work on specific organ systems, to work on different areas of the brain, like our specialty at HML, as well as a whole host of other things that you can do with this laser. And to learn more about the lasers, head on over to shedlightcoldlasers.com, 518-338-6658, or you can email Dr. Griswold, or Griswold as I call him, shedlightinformation@gmail.com. And we want to note that you don't have to be a doc to buy these. You can be a patient, someone off the street. And Shedlight specializes in educating professionals, doctors, therapists, as well as lay public people, if you will. If they want to buy a laser, they will completely educate you on how to use it, or they will send you to a doc on the ground, someone like us, to learn how to use it, or they'll just send you to that doctor's office, and then you can let the doc take over. Either way, they'll give you all the knowledge and information and resources you need to either get that laser or where to find one in the doc's office.